House Republicans advance pieces of their mega bill with party line votes, Democrats are beginning to hone their message in opposition. Take a listen to Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries this morning.
Republicans are really pushing an extreme agenda at this point in time, directed by Donald Trump. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that Republicans in the Congress continue to simply be a rubber stamp as opposed to standing up for the best interests of their constituents.
Joining me now is Pennsylvania Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle. He is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee and spent the night in markup for this tax and spending package. I know you are bleary-eyed today. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. You were up all night with the Ways and Means Committee with all Democratic amendments being defeated. The tax provision of this package did advance. It advanced along party line votes. And you have said you are going to keep fighting this. How do you do that, given that you're in the minority?
Yeah, so first let me explain and apologize up front if I sound incoherent or more incoherent than normal. We started early afternoon yesterday, and we went all through the night, not concluding until 8 a.m. this morning. So we'll do my best here to explain what is a very large and complicated piece of legislation. The bottom line, though, is, and this is really the biggest piece, and Congressional Budget Office confirmed these figures. This piece of legislation that passed Ways and Means last night or at 8 o'clock this morning will strip away health coverage from at least 13.7 million Americans. They will take those cuts and the money saved from Medicaid spending that otherwise would happen, as well as spending in the Affordable Care Act, and instead divert that and more to pay for tax cuts that mostly go to multimillionaires and billionaires. You can understand why even conservative Republican Senator Josh Hawley called this morally wrong.
Well, and I was just talking about all of this with Congressman Johnson and the issue of Medicaid specifically. He says the CBO numbers are not totally accurate. He rejects them. But he also makes this broader argument, which is that Republicans are looking to find as much as $800 billion in cuts. And he argues, other Republicans argue, that Medicaid should not be going to people who are able-bodied, who can get coverage through their work. What is your response to that?
Well, so first, let me be clear, because I heard a lot of this over the course of 18 hours from my Republican colleagues. I don't for 1 second support anyone who would defraud the system. Frankly, I find it offensive. It's offensive to anyone who's going out for a living and working. I don't support anyone who can work, choosing not to do so, and being on the system. Do you know, if you take all of those people who are able-bodied, if you take even the most wildly high projections of fraud, they wouldn't factor even 10% of the cost of the cuts that Republicans are pushing through. Furthermore, the Congressional Budget Office is the authority here. They are scrupulously nonpartisan. The fact that Republicans are now disputing their figures shows just how awful they are when you consider, I mean, upwards of 14 million people losing their health coverage because of this. That would be the greatest loss of health care coverage in American history. Not even during the Great Depression did we see that many people lose their health care.
You know, there's been this discussion about what is effectively an end run around the Speaker of the House to prevent cuts to Medicaid, to prevent cuts to food stamps. It's called a discharge petition. What is the latest on that effort, Congressman? Is that realistic? Do you see that having any legs?
Yeah, you know, I'm always wary to talk about any, tactics that we may take either now or in the future. But I will say the most straightforward way to defeat this is exactly what happened 8 years ago when the Affordable Care Act was saved. You had just enough, only a few, Senate Republicans who famously voted, including the late, great John McCain, giving the final thumbs down. And that was what was able to save the ACA. So here, 8 years later, when we're talking about cuts not only to the ACA, but devastating cuts for those who are on Medicaid, it would literally just take 3 House Republicans, 3 out of about 220 House Republicans joining with House Democrats, and we would be able to stop these devastating cuts. This is a great opportunity for political courage from just a few of them that would make the ultimate difference. So I appeal to them to join with us and save health coverage for 13.7 million Americans.
Well, while Democrats are trying to figure out exactly how to oppose the bill, there is this impeachment resolution for President Trump that is coming to the floor. Do you think this is a misguided attempt? This is by your colleague, Sri Thinder.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that a majority Republican House of Representatives is not going to impeach Donald Trump. And certainly we are not going to find 67 votes in the U.S. Senate anytime soon. That is for sure. So I think it's very unfortunate that my Democratic colleague, who right now is facing a very stiff primary, chose to engage in what essentially is a publicity stunt for himself, when I and my colleagues have been up all throughout the night trying to save health coverage for millions of Americans. That's what we should be focusing on at this moment.
All right, well, I do have to turn to former President Biden, the state of the Democratic Party. Of course, excerpts have come out of this new book, including new details that Mr. Biden had difficulty remembering the names of some of his top advisors. Let me just read you a portion of the book. The author's writing, quote, standing in the Oval Office with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Kate Bedingfield, his communications director, he couldn't come up with either of their names, according to one witness. Steve, he had said to Sullivan, Steve, he continued, obviously struggling to recall Jake's name. He turned to Bedingfield. Press, he called her, as he beckoned them into the Oval Office. This, of course, by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. What was your reaction to hearing this, Congressman?
Well, this is actually the first time I heard it, what you read. I have to tell you that I feel, as Yogi Berra once said, it's deja vu all over again. Because in 2017 and 2018, I kept getting from members of the media endless questions about the 2016 Democratic primary. And what I said then applies now. I'm really not interested in last season or last election, why a team lost, why we lost. We're right now in the game. I'm focused on the fight that we are immediately in to save health coverage for the American people. And then in terms of politics, I'll be focused on the election that will be happening just 18 months from now, where I believe we Democrats have a greater than 50-50 shot of winning back the House of Representatives. So that's the election that I'm going to be focused on. Not 2024, not 2016, not what Al Gore should have done in 2000 or Jimmy Carter in 1980. All of those things are now for the historians, not those of us who are in politics right now today and for the future.
Well, let me challenge you a little bit on that, Congressman. In order to move forward, do you have to acknowledge and contend with the mistakes of the past? And do you think it was a mistake?
I think it would be. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I actually think it would be a great mistake and almost self-indulgent at this point for any elected Democrat to relitigate 2024 or 2016. I mean, if you can find me a way that we can go back to the past and change those things, then it would be worthwhile to talk about. But otherwise, I only have so much time and so much energy. I'm going to focus on the fight that I am in, because I really do believe saving health coverage for the American people is a winnable fight. I think it will actually come down to just one vote in the House of Representatives, just like it did 8 years ago in the Senate to save the Affordable Care Act. I think that I'm doing the most responsible thing right now, being focused on the fight that I'm actually in.
But, you know, you were supportive of President Biden. He, of course, visited Pennsylvania. Do you think that he shouldn't have run for re-election based on what you witnessed firsthand?
You know, again, the reality is that election's passed. It was very close. We lost by a point and a half, the second closest presidential election of my lifetime. I'm more focused on the 2026 elections, which are the most important congressional elections, perhaps, of my lifetime, coming up in a very short period of time.
Before I let you go, a new AP poll has just 35% of Democrats saying they're optimistic about the future of their party, compared to 36% who are pessimistic. How do you fix that deficit in optimism, Congressman? How do you get the party rallied again?
You know, I kind of mentioned this before, but I have to say this moment really reminds me of 8 years ago. In 2017, Donald Trump had just been elected in a narrow election. They had a Republican trifecta, actually a much bigger majority in the House of Representatives, a 47-seat majority then instead of only a few seats now. They had the Senate, they had the Supreme Court, they had the White House. And there was a rather doom and gloom type mood among some about Democratic prospects. Well, that proved to be exactly false, because the very next congressional election, Democrats won the majority in the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi came back for a second stint as Speaker. And then the very next presidential election, we Democrats were successful and actually had a trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the White House. So the reality is most elections actually of my lifetime have tended to not validate the previous election, but actually overturn them. And I believe that if we do everything that we're supposed to do here and now in this fight as congressional Democrats, that we'll be successful next year.
Congressman Boyle, thank you so much for joining us after a marathon night. Hope you can get a little bit of rest today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.